Well, welcome back to our library studio. I'm here with the Wookiee. I don't think you can see much of the Wookiee at the moment, but we are back to Qatsyr Harvest. It's been a while since we've done an episode on Qatsyr. It's a series that we've started long ago. We're probably somewhere in the 60s or 70s in terms of the episode number. We will finish our review of all things that can be known about Shabuah, and then we will move our attention to Towrah. So there's a lot more here still to discuss. Before we begin, however, I want to discuss something that was brought to my attention about an hour ago. A friend of mine, somebody that actually was the first person to encourage me to shed some of my anonymity that I had writing under the pseudonym Yada, so that I was able to make a contribution without being known. Asked me to begin doing radio programs, audio programs. And we began by doing an audio, they weren't even called blogs back then, but began by doing what we called Yada Yahowah radio. Oh, now I forget it's been almost 20 years ago. And then that took off and became Shattering Myths, which was a syndicated radio program through the Genesis Communications Network, which I did 5 days a week, 3 hours a day. And all the while, I continued the Yada Yahowah radio program. And in December, that program ended on Blog Talk Radio. Thankfully, Blog Talk Radio was going out of business because it's been replaced by live streams at which we're now doing on X, on Facebook, on YouTube, of course, and on Rumble, as well as other sites. And we began the blog. And this individual, who has been with me all of that time, said that when they were doing a Facebook search for me just yesterday, the first account they came to was one that was comparing my wife and I to Jimmy and Tammy Faye Bakker. And so I'd like to speak a little bit about the disgusting nature of human filth that would make that kind of a connection. Jimmy and Tammy Faye Bakker were religious frauds. They built their broadcasting studio on donations. They built their home and lifestyle on donations. They bought their jet on donations. They had real estate developments that you could pay into. They sold their books for profit. And they were hacking the religion of Christianity to enrich themselves. My wife and I have zero in common with those shysters. First of all, we oppose Christianity and speak out very strongly against it. I just did an hour show from our Rainbow studio earlier today denouncing Christianity. I built my homes, all of them, without taking a dime from anyone. I offer my books in their entirety, all 35 of them, free, online, in their entirety. Always have. I turned my home into a studio and invested my money to bring these kinds of programs to you, and have still never taken a dime from anyone. I don't have a real estate development that you can buy into. There is no donate button anywhere on any site that I have ever been part of. I have never taken a contribution or a donation from anyone at any time, nor has my wife. We are anti-religious rather than pro-religious. You could not be more distinct from them and still be human. And so for a piece of human excrement to make this comparison, because they have a miserable, disgusting life, of two people who have devoted their lives to translating Yahweh's testimony from the oldest possible sources, scrubbing it of the rabbinical diacritical markings, sharing tens of thousands of unheralded insights, devoting every waking hour for 24 years to share everything that they have learned for free, offering it all to you. And you want to denounce them by making a comparison to the two people who would be the furthest from them? It's reprehensible to such an extent it's deserved this reprimand. And we have another that is bragging about trying to mess up the algorithms on our media accounts. The fellow's name is Dennis T. Such that he will do whatever he can to thwart the distribution of Yahweh's testimony. The devil's advocate, I guess we could call him, but the devil wouldn't take him. You know, I don't care that you don't want to go to heaven. I don't want you there either. But why write your own ticket to hell? Oh. Now that we've had that little discussion, I'd like to proceed with where we were on Qatsyr harvests. Because there are people who might be interested in getting off this planet alive and learning what they can from, well, a prophet that very few ever talk about, Joel. And we were in the midst of reviewing what he had to say about our time. And the passage that we were on as we concluded our last program on this material reads as follows. The threshing floors. This is ha-goren, the places where grain is processed and becomes usable by threshing and winnowing, will be filled with pure grain, which is symbolic of the most radiant children, winnowed and purified by the most brilliant sun. Bar, the brightest sons and daughters who are chosen and favored for their integrity and understanding to be heirs within this special relationship. And the new wine of fresh inheritance, sweeter, with only brief fermentation, will overflow the presses and the vats, along with glistening olive oil. Well, there you have it. The three symbols that Yahweh loves most to use when describing what it is that he is intending to accomplish, using metaphors that are not only attributed to harvest, but to three ingredients in particular. And these three ingredients all have something in common. They all must be crushed to be beneficial. Oh, so I guess that numbskull that was comparing my wife and I to Jimmy and Tammy Faye Baker was doing us a favor because their rebuke was crushing. Thank you so much. Well, the three things that Yahweh speaks of that direct our attention to the realization that everyone who is brought into Yahweh's storehouse has been crushed, has been attacked, it's gone through a difficult time, sometimes many, and has developed character in the process. Our grain, the threshing floors will be filled with pure grain. Oh, grain has to be crushed. That is what a threshing floor does. It releases the valuable part of the crop, which is a infinitesimal, really, amount of the entire plant. When you consider the roots, the stalk, and the leaves, as well as the chaff, that little kernel of grain is a really tiny part of that plant, and yet it's the plant that brings us bread when properly crushed, winnowed, and then prepared. So it says the threshing floors will be male, filled. Now, the fact that they're going to be filled, male, means that we prevail. In spite of all of the naysayers, in spite of all of the critics, in spite of all of those conspiratorial nutcases that have miserable lives and want to drag everyone down to their level, despite the fact that Israel is a tough crowd and doesn't like to listen and has shown a reluctance to listen for a very long time. And in spite of the fact that you can never prevail with the religious, the conspiratorial, or the overtly political with evidence and reason, we prevail. There are enough of you out there that from Yahweh's perspective, the threshing floor will be filled. That means we do our job. And they're going to be filled. The first thing on the list was with pure grain, symbolic of the most radiant children, purified by the most brilliant sun. It is bar here. There are a number of words for grain in Hebrew. The one that is used the least frequently happens to be bar. And Yahweh chose it in this particular case because of all of the nuances that come with it. Bar means brilliant. It means sun. It speaks of children. And so it tells us emphatically that this grain that is on this threshing floor, that is now filled with abundance, are radiant children who've been winnowed from the chaff of this world to become brilliant sons and daughters. Isn't that a beautiful picture that God is painting for us? Now, the second thing is new wine, and this is Thyrosh. Thyrosh is, if you wanted to be technical from a wine-making point of view, it would be a Beaujolais. A first harvest, a short fermentation period, fresh, refreshing, delightful in its light and fruity flavor, but without very much alcohol. The fermentation process is brief on it, which means it's just enough to kill the pathogens and to make the wine safe to drink, and to turn some of what you consume into sugars that provide a sweet taste. So this is the new wine. But Thyrosh doesn't just mean wine, just as bar doesn't just mean grain. Thyrosh speaks of an inheritance. So it is the fresh and new wine of inheritance. What is the new wine of inheritance? Well, Dode provided the means for us to inherit the covenant by fulfilling Pesach, Matzah, and Bakurim in 33 CE, year 4000 Yah. And it is our job to cultivate the harvest of Shabuah and Towrah in 2027 and in 2033. And so the new wine of fresh inheritance addresses these more recent harvests where God's children, the covenant family, are going to enjoy God's company and be called unto him. So not only will the threshing floors be filled with radiant children, we now know that the new wine of inheritance will overflow the presses and vats. And if that were not enough, there will be glistening olive oil. Just like grapes are crushed to create wine, olives are crushed to create olive oil. And it's interesting, the first crushing of the olives is called the virgin crush. It's called virgin olive oil. And if it's extra virgin olive oil, it means that that first press is a light press. And so instead of crushing the olive to the point where they give up all of their juice, but they've been put through a very rigorous crushing, this is a light press. It speaks really of those who will be harvested on Shabuah and Towrah that have not had to endure the full onslaught of the time of Yisrael's troubles. Now, I know these are olives, and that speaks of Towrah as a harvest, but I think that the implication here is, and this does not mention extra virgin olive oil, I'm just reading that into it, but that the extra virgin, if you will, press of that will accompany particularly the grain harvest, which is the first, that is Shabuah, but the olives, the Jews, who join us on Shabuah will be those who have certainly been crushed enough to get their attention and develop character so that they are drawn to Yahweh and away from religion and politics. But of course, it will be that final tough press that will be the Towrah harvest in 2033. So as we consider this statement from Joel 2:24, it's actually Yoel. Yoel means Yahweh is God. The Goren is an ideal metaphor to reveal that something desirable and productive can emerge from a crushing experience. It is why Yahweh's home was built above what was originally a threshing floor in Dod's day. We should never lose sight of that. And from this perspective, to render bar as grain and nothing more is to miss the point of God's message. Bar means sun, in addition to brilliant and radiant light. It speaks of those who are chosen and favored, possessing integrity and understanding. The bar become heirs to a very, very special family relationship. The message of the harvested grain, the grapes becoming wine, and the olives producing the shimmering olive oil of inheritance has been refined and illustrated, with us learning here that two of those three were to the fullest possible degree. What did it say about the grain harvest? That it was a robust harvest, that the threshing floors are filled, male, with pure grain. And what did it say about the new wine of inheritance? It said that the vats are overflowing. Right? Didn't say that about the olive oil, did it? You know what the inference is there before we go on? It means that God is delighted with the eventuality of the quality of the individuals and perhaps even the number of individuals that are harvested during the wheat harvest of Shabuah. And that God is delighted that because of it, there will be many who will receive their inheritance. But when it comes to that final harvest, which is a gleaning, even the term lakat is different than Qatsyr, it's going to be slim pickings. Jews are tough. They haven't listened to God for a very long time. They think they're smarter than God. That's why the Talmud exists. That's why they won't even say his name. It's just a Hashem to them. And God's, by stating that two of these three are at an abundance and the third is just there, is saying that, yeah, we will produce a Towrah gleaning of olives. It says there will be 2 or 3 on the uppermost branches, and there'll be 4 or 5 on the lower branches which have been cut away. It's going to happen, is just as God attests. It's just not going to be prolific. That's sad for Israel. It's sad for Yahweh. He deserves better. But I do think it's important that for you to know that distinction. God is an exceedingly talented linguist. And it should be noted when he makes a judgment call on his view of 2 of those 3 ingatherings, but not the third. The story of Yahweh is telling is revealing for anyone paying attention and listening intently, because what it means is that the Shabuah harvest will be plentiful and that it will lead to a tough fought Towrah gleaning. And both then, of course, will lead to a Kippurim celebration that will meet, if not exceed, Yahweh's expectations. And finally, to Sukkah, where we camp out with God. And as a result of the harvest of standing grain, fulfilling the promise of the Shabat on the threshing floor of Yahweh's son, Dod, the one that he acquired on the summit of Mount Moriah, it is going to be filled with radiant children. The brilliant sun made it possible for the covenant family to be winnowed and purified, then be brought home to the house of God. It is why he acquired that threshing floor. It is why he fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Bokurim. It is why Shabuah is a Bokurim harvest. We're putting these pieces together so that you understand the connection between these things. The Shabuah Qatsyr is going to be exceedingly productive, filling Yahweh's expectation of many sons and daughters, and all having chosen to be with him. And these bar will be the beneficiaries of the special family relationship that Yahweh intended, becoming his heirs through understanding. It will all occur along the ridgeline of Zion, with the signs that are posted along the way, pointing to the very foundation of the home of the covenant, all while the heirs to the Bereth, who have been winnowed from the world, will be separated from the chaff, which then will be blown away because the storehouses will be full. The vineyard Dod planted along Sion has borne fruit, and just as grapes become wine when crushed and briefly fermented, with the addition of yeast, the wine represents the blood Dod shed as his body fulfilled Passover, marking the doorway to life while opening Yahweh's home to the covenant family. But the yeast, which transforms the crushed grapes into wine, is vital too, because it represents the embedding fungus of religion and politics that Dod's soul carried into Sheol to perfect us. In so doing, he produced the bar, the purified and brilliant heirs to the covenant. And in this way, what the great Zeroah did for us on Pesach and Matzah to create Bokurim is what made Shabuah possible. One flows from the other. On this day, the covenant family is reaping what the Son of God and our King has sown. But there's more to the song of the harvest. There will be two witnesses serving as conduits of olive oil. We've been told as much through the prophet Zechariah, representing and they're going to represent the menorah, which is the lamp that takes us to Yahweh. You can see one spinning over my left shoulder here with the 7 candles. That center candle, it represents Shabuah. And it's powered by the Ruach, the Spirit of Yahweh. And these two witnesses will have arrived. They arrive on the 18th of April, which is Passover, and 2030. So they'll have 3.5 years, essentially, to share God's message with all who will listen. And that will lead to this final gleaning, a final ingathering of olives representing the Israelites and Yehudim, and then the anointed will return to claim his own. Now, as a result, we will all live forevermore in the garden of perfect fields of mature wheat and barley blowing and glistening in the wind, next to the productive vineyards cultivated and harvested by a king, and alongside a deeply rooted and restored grove of olive trees whose oil anoints and illuminates. This is the picture God is painting for our minds to perceive. This is the story Yoel's words are inscribing in our thoughts. This is the explanation of how Pesach and Matzah produce Bikurim, and when cultivated, lead us to the benefits of Shabuah and to Towrah, all in anticipation of Kippurim and the great joy of Sukkah. This is also the story of Yisrael's restoration at long last. Following 3,470 years of estrangement, as the covenant is restored and renewed, the stick representing that choder that we spoke of downstairs this morning has been used to shake the olives out of the tree so that they can be gathered by God and taken into his treasure house. And I should share with you that in days of old, when the final gleaning of the olive took place, it was literally to take a stick, a choder, and to beat the olives off the tree. That's how stubborn they are. The text reads, the prophet had to say, I will reconcile and restore on your behalf the years which so quickly disappeared and were devoured. Then you shall eat and be nourished, and you will be overwhelmingly satisfied, radiating a clear and brilliant light while cheering the name of Yahowah, your God, who, for the benefit of the relationship, has acted and engaged marvelously with you. God speaking now, so never again will my people be humiliated or disrespected. Joel 2:26. So as we consider what Yahowah inspired his prophet to say, it is time for Shalom, the reconciliation and the restoration of the relationship, when Yahowah fulfills his promises and he honors his vows. On behalf of all of the years which so quickly disappeared and were devoured. Yes, years became decades, decades, centuries, centuries, millennia. And there were 3 of them and more, all of which disappeared. Fortunately, from Yahowah's perspective, as he manages time differently than do we, it can seem to have gone by so quickly. And truly, when we look back now and we read the Torah, and we realize that these events took place 3,450 to 70 years ago, it seems to compress time, doesn't it? Because so little has changed over time. So much of life has disappeared. So many lives are gone. They were devoured. They were consumed. People lived their lives, never came to know Yahowah, and died as their souls were extinguished. It is a shame, but fortunately there is resolution. Because a time is arriving where rather than being devoured, you can eat and be nourished, and you will be exceedingly satisfied. And there is a time where those who were dehumanized and demonized will become halal, brilliant, radiating a clear and shining light while cheering. And what are they going to cheer? It isn't Hashem, it's the Shem of Yahowah. If you're not among those who are willing to embrace Yahowah's name and to share it along with me, to celebrate it along with me, to recognize it along with me, and to share not only his name, but his name's connection with his Torah and his prophets, then you are not going to be among those who are harvested. This is what is required. It is a prerequisite, if you will, of forming a relationship with Yahowah. And even if there are, and there have been some who have begun this journey with God introducing himself before introducing his name, the introduction of his name comes shortly thereafter. We know with whom we are engaging. There's only one God, and he has but one name, Yahowah. If you are speaking for a God, and that God does not have the name Yahowah, and you do not use the name Yahowah, you ought to cease and desist, because your God isn't God. And it is Yahowah who, for the benefit of this relationship, will finally act and engage. And he's going to do so miraculously in the end. From really the point that Yahowah and I met now 24 years ago, he has begun to do something he had not done for 2,500 years prior. And that was to actually to begin to work with a person, and then with a family, and then with a people, marvelously and miraculously. And it will build, and it's continuing to build. And it's wonderful to witness. And what we see is the culmination of God working with a man to create these books that you see behind me, all 35 of them, free at yadayah.com. And now this YAHOWAH blog, and approaching 1,000 hours worth of content. What you're going to witness is that as we move closer and closer to the time, even after divulging 10,000 profound insights about God, many, many hundreds of them, some of the most profound discoveries in human history, that these insights are going to come at an even accelerated rate, and they will continue to be exceedingly profound. Now, there isn't a way to be any more profound than recognizing that Jesus didn't exist, that the most popular religion in the world is based entirely on identity theft, and that the actual Messiah and Son of God, who was crucified in 33 CE per his own prophecy, is David. These combination of realizations are as profound as anything in human history, as is the fact that there's 5 conditions of the covenant, and that the 5 benefits of the covenant are delivered through the first 3 Moed Mikre, which Dode fulfilled in 33 CE, as is the understanding of exactly when, where, why, and how the final 4 Moed Mikre will be fulfilled. The fact that Yahowah's name is easily pronounced. The fact that there are 3 destinations for human souls. All of these realizations and so many more, having an understanding of what each of the 7 Moed Mikre represent and how to properly celebrate them. Knowing all there is to know and celebrate about Dode's marvelous lives, and the fact that he will have 3 of them by the time he returns, and that he is returning as brilliant as the sun in God's presence, and that day will be October 2nd at sundown in Jerusalem, the 2nd of October, 2033, and that we are returning thereafter to the Garden of Eden, where the whole earth is transformed into those conditions. And just as God has been miraculous in the presentation of these insights, you're going to witness something really extraordinary with the Shabuah harvest, the most massive miracle undertaken by God up to this point. The Towrah ingathering will be similar. The return of his 2 witnesses on Passover in 2030 will also be miraculous. The sign, that is moving scroll that he's going to have shown above the two witnesses, showing these programs, presenting the books, presenting his own testimony and his own words. It's going to be miraculous. He's going to lift up the two tablets of stone for all to see. He's likely to even show the Ark of the Covenant. Those two witnesses are going to be extraordinary in the sense that they are now spiritual beings that can manifest themselves in a material way, but they are infinitely more powerful in every respect than a mere mortal. God's going to be more and more miraculous. Then when we get to the Shabat, this Saturday of September 24th of 2033, and the sacrifice of the red heifer, that's going to be the greatest show on earth. Yahweh is going to interact in exceedingly marvelous and miraculous ways on that day. And as a result of this, particularly as we arrive on Towrah in year 6000 Yah, that will be the last time that God's people are ever humiliated. They will never be disrespected again. Joel 2:26. It will be as I have shared, because this is what Yahweh has promised. And all of this will play out during the decade between 10:723 and 10:733, as we are now in the final months prior to the Shavuot harvest. I have just written something about the timing of the Shavuot harvest. I think is probably apropos that I share. I finally completed the book of Daniel in terms of my rewrite of chapters 7, 8, 9, and 12. And at the end of 9, there are some profoundly important statements regarding the sacrifice of Dod's herald. And Dod makes it very clear that he sticks it through, that he stays the course, that he does not falter, that no matter the naysayers or the jerks out there, that he continues to serve Yahweh, Dod, and his people without ever faltering, without ever relenting. And it reminds us 3 different times that the horrible period of the Torahless one and this torment for Israel will be 7 years in duration. And he's very clear that the worst of it is in the last 3.5 years, but it's constantly referred to as 7 years. It's a week. And a week in this case would be a year, is the way the text is presented in Daniel. And the text in Daniel, of course, is deliberately presented such that no one would understand it until now. And what I want to share is that for the Shavuot harvest leading to the Towrah harvest to be a full week of years, the Shavuot harvest has to be on the 22nd of May in 2026. Or at least the beginning of the time of Jacob's troubles, or as Daniel's, it's Gabriel's prophecy to Daniel represents, at the very least, this has to be the timing of the carving out of an Islamic state of terror out of the heart of Israel. And so there is definitely a terrible time that is spoken of as 7 years. And it is 7 years and a couple of months that transpire between May 22nd of 2026 and September 24th of 2033. But then when we consider the specific dates when Michael and Gabriel are informing Daniel for our benefit of the exact number of days that will transpire prior from and a certain point specified to the Teruah sacrifice of the Adam Parah and the end of the separation of Israel, the scattering of Israel, the denunciation of Israel, that there are 2,300 days. And that brings us, of course, to the 11th of June in 2027. And so when you have a specific number like that, and it's provided by Makael and Gabriel, the natural tendency is to say, well, then the harvest needs to or will occur on the 11th of June, 2027. And that is still the most reasonable conclusion from the numbers that have been presented, recognizing that there are still 4 references to a full week from the events associated with Shabuah, and that is this covenant with many that renders Israel indefensible and begins this time of trouble. And so my conclusion of all of this is that it is important for us to leave this particular question unresolved. I think that's by design. I think God wants us to do everything in our power to fulfill the mission that he has established for us, to make this upcoming Shabuah harvest of grain as productive as possible in terms of the quality of those who become heirs to the covenant. And that we should work as if that is all the time we have left, and be prepared for that to be the case, and then be exceedingly pleased if we're given a reprieve and have more time and have another year that we can continue to serve our God and his people. And so I think we should work as if that's all the time we have, another 10 months, and yet have the fortitude to stay another 22 months if we're given that opportunity. And I think it is so much better for us to set our expectations on the harvest to the 11th of June of 2027, knowing that if it does occur on the 22nd of May on Shabuah, both are Shabuah, then who's going to complain? Particularly if we have continued to focus our energy and completing the mission to the extent that we're capable by that time. Who's going to complain, right? And if our expectation is the 11th of June and we are given that additional year, then almost everyone, I won't say almost, I will say everyone who is genuinely engaged in God's business they're going to celebrate. We say, we have another year. We can still make our lives count. We can please our God. We can please our King. We can continue to serve and be of great value. So I think it's important that we don't foreclose on either date, but that we leave both open. They both fit for a different reason. If it is Shabuah in 22 May of 2026, then this is when the 2 states will be carved out of the one, making Israel indefensible. And then Alaska 2.0, this onslaught that will be 1,000 times worse than the great slaughter on 10/7, will occur on the 11th of June in 2027. And and that would allow a full 7 years for the time of trouble. And if that occurs, then we're going to see the Fakistinian state carved out of Israel in the next 10 months. And if not, I can tell you then it will all come to fruition in 2027 on June 11th. And that will give us more time. It gives Israel a little more time. Not that Israel's going to change significantly. We've already been told that the grain harvest of Shavuot is robust and that there will be an overflowing number of those who inherit all that Yah has to give. But the quality of the teruah in gathering of olives, it was left unspecified, was it not? So things to think about. I happen to be the most comfortable with that mindset here, and for a lot of reasons. One is we're all better when we're not so narrow in our perspective that we focus on one dot. When our perspective is broad, when we are always evaluating the evidence and growing and learning and honing our skill to discern what Yahweh is sharing with us, and never being satisfied that, oh, well, we got it all now, but are continuing to grow in our comprehension. We're the most useful. Our lives are the most complete and full. So I think that this is a mature, an appropriate way for us to go about this. Now, that said, the most recent analysis that I did of Dod's prophecy as Gabriel, speaking of himself being the Mashiach and cut off not for himself, and him giving us the concluding date of Matzah, and doing so over 600 years in advance, and having 33 CE not only perfectly aligned with the prophecy so that it is the last date of Matzah in 33 CE from the beginning date of the vernal equinox, the first of Abib, and which would have been Nisan and the Babylonian mindset, but that would have been the first of Abib in Nisan in 444 BC, the 476 years, prophetic years in 21 days, takes you precisely to the end of Matzah in 33 CE, which is obviously year 4000 Yah, because it was exactly 40 Yobel or 2,000 years prior to that, when using the genealogies in the Torah that we know that in 1968 BCE, Abraham and Yishak went out Mount Moriah to live out a harbinger for what would occur on Passover 2,000 years thereafter, when God offered his beloved son as the lamb. So with that being the case, and then realizing that over 100 years span, a full century, there wasn't a single other year where the vernal equinox, first light of the moon, and the days of the week aligned such that Passover dinner was on a Thursday night and the lamb could serve on a Friday, with matzah being the most important day and the celebration of the Shabat taking place on a natural Shabat, and such that father and son were united on Bakurim, firstborn children, on the first day of the week. This only happens in 33, among all years from year 1 through year 100 CE. So when we extrapolate, therefore, from year 4000 Yah, 33 CE, to year 6000 Yah, the dates of Teruah, Kippurim, and Sukkah are literally etched in stone. And that means that the Teruah ingathering and the sacrifice of the red heifer, the Adamah Parah, will occur on the 23rd and 24th of September 2033, the greatest show on earth. This will be such an amazing experience to witness, to participate in, to celebrate. And then the return of Dod, as brilliant as the sun is, Elyon, in Yahweh's presence on Kippurim, such that we're prepared to enter the garden again on Sukkah. Those dates, October 2nd and 7th, are established, and we should not be surprised, therefore, that there is a full solar eclipse on Towrah and a full lunar eclipse on Sukkah. And even on the first of Abib in year 6000 there will be a full solar eclipse, and on Passover in 33 CE, year 6000 there will be a full lunar eclipse. These are marvelous affirmations. Just as there was a full lunar eclipse when Dode fulfilled Passover in 33 CE. So when Yahweh speaks of being with Yisrael, he is identifying with the best of his people. With Yisrael meaning what we have come to know as Ish, individuals who, Sarah, engage and endure El with God. And the best of his people begin with a reference to Abraham and Sarah, Yishak and Rivka, Jacob and Leah, and then to the likes of Moshe, Yahusha, Caleb, Samuel. Look at Wookie even sits up for Caleb. He knows Caleb means dog, and that Caleb is also being fully judgmental and all heart. The great Shamuel, the judge and prophet, God's beloved. There is no greater man who has ever lived and will live again. Dode, this marvelous prophet who is so often taken for granted because he was abused by Peter and attributing his testimony to Pentecost and the birth of a church 2,000 years ago, when he's speaking of a time just 8 years from now. Elia, my partner, the last of the two witnesses, a man who orchestrated the ultimate denouncement of Israel's propensity to be religious and political. Yashayah, who is my brother. Yashayah and I will be celebrating, I think, to the extent that even Leah sometimes appears to be a bit jealous, where she says, wait a minute, Yashayah, I know you love him, but he's my guy. It's a fun rivalry because Yashayah is so excited about our relationship and the fact that I have received my guidance on how to be a choder, how to serve Yahweh through the things that he has written, through his textbook on proper chodering. And when he sees it all manifested, particularly with the man from Edom, who is, he says, in the wine vat, speaking of this harvest of an inheritance, he says, finally, after all of these years, this man is in that wine vat with me. He is my Zeroah. He is the one that's cultivating the seeds that I have sown for this harvest. He is the man from Edom, dressed in red, so appropriately to save so many. Yahusha. They just don't get any more brilliant as prophets. I have a tendency, because I'm so in love with Yahusha and Yashayah, that I have a tendency sometimes to skip past Yirmiyah, but we just had a tremendous blessing by reading the 26th chapter of Yirmiyah and its great ode to Dode, our king. And of course, the 31st chapter of Yirmiyah is one of the most brilliant ever written. So Yirmiyah is a young man with great wisdom and a love for Yahweh. Zechariah speaks to our time, from the witnesses to the last days. And of course, Malachi is the last of Yahweh's messengers to his family. And now this family includes the children of the covenant who were led home by Yada and by Yada Yahowah. These are God's people. And so this reads, and you will know that I am in the midst of Yisrael. I am Yahweh, your God, and there is no other. My family will never be disapproved or experience distress again throughout all time. It is truly amazing that Paul, Peter, Luke would have cited Joel to claim that he was the prophet who spoke of their birth of their church and changed Shavuot to Pentecost. And that is for many reasons. One, of course, is the prophet's name is Joel. It means Yahweh is God. It doesn't mean Jesus is God. I was reading today a post on my feed on Facebook, and I had this one person who wanted to rename Dode and Jesus some variation of Yosha. And this other person said, no, Jesus is the God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. And you're going, oh my God, Jesus is the God of Abraham. And God, you want me to speak to people this stupid? I mean, that's asking a lot. All right, there, young man. I will set you down. There's the Wookiee. The second reason that it is just astonishing that Christians would have Peter and Paul, Luke, would have misappropriated the prophet Joel beyond the fact that his name means Yahweh's God, is that he is speaking of something that has not yet occurred, of a time when his people, Yisrael, would never be distressed or disapproved again. And what did the damn Christians do? In fact, even in the Acts 2, where Peter is shown misappropriating Joel, he is condemning Jews. He's saying that the Jews crucified his God. Oh, last time I checked, gods can't die. But nonetheless, that's what they said. And so you can't say that Jews will never be disapproved again. Israel will never be disapproved again when you created a God-forsaken religion based upon disapproving Jews. And if you're a Christian and you can't put that together, you can't read, wait a minute, he just cited Joel as the birth of our church, and Joel says that Israel is God's family, and they will never be disapproved again and never experience distress, and your religion persecuted them and did so for 19 centuries. And you're not able to say, whoa, that was really stupid. Obviously, that's untrue. And if that is the declaration of the birth of our church, we got nothing. That's why I'm not a Christian. You got nothing. And when this says, I am Yahweh, and you speaking to Yisrael, specifically naming Yisrael, will Yada, that I am Yahweh. That means he hasn't abandoned Israel, doesn't it? And that means he didn't change his name to Jesus, doesn't it? But can't you think? I know they call it faith, and faith has no correlation with evidence or reason. And I know that's the reason that it's a belief and not a knowing. But good God, why would you believe something that's this obviously untrue? What's the purpose in believing something that is this untrue? Christianity condemns Israel. Christianity steals the inheritance of Israel, which is why they demean and dehumanize Jews and Israel. And they steal the inheritance of Israel and give it to their church, even though there's no mention of a church. And Yahweh, it's explicit. When he returns, he's returning for Israel. Not a church, not for Christians, for Israel. What part of this don't you get? Why are you so insistent on calling God a liar? Which is what you're doing. Christianity exists to rob God's people of everything, to rob his son of his title, Messiah and Son of God, to rob God of his name, to rob his people of their inheritance. It's nothing but an act of thievery. And when you read this, it's obvious. Why would you participate in an act of thievery? It's kind of like being a MAGA today. Over the last 9 months, it has become obvious that Donald Trump is the confabulator. There is no correlation between what he says or believes and reality. And so if you're still a supporter of Donald Trump, you aren't being political anymore. You're enmeshed in a cult of personality. You're just gone. Evidence and reason no longer matter to you. You're living in a fantasy world and following the devil. Well, the same thing is true with Christianity. If you were a Christian, shame on you. That means you're not thinking. It means you don't care anything for God. That you're happy to call God a liar. I don't think he likes that very much. Nor does he like that dead God on a stick very much either. And you will know, Israel, that I am in your midst. I am Yahweh. I'm not the Lord. I'm not Jesus. I'm not Hashem. I am Yahweh, and I am in your midst, which means Yahweh is returning. You know what that means? That means that Yisrael returns to Yahweh. And you know what that means? That we prevail. Since I am the first person in thousands of years who has reintroduced Yahweh's name to his people and have explained that they need to return to Yahweh before he can return to them, and have provided the timeline and the means to do that, it means that Yahweh, by enabling the Choder and the Nakri to do this job, succeeds. There is no other. Wa and Od. There will never be anyone besides me, Yahweh says, not now or subsequently, as I am the only one who can restore and provide an eternal witness, and to whom you can return. I tell Israel all the time, you're looking for the salvation of Israel? It's found in one place, Yahweh. Return to him, or you will continue to suffer. He says that his family will never, ever be disapproved or experience distress throughout all time. Why? Because he's returning to earth that the conditions experienced during Eden. There'll be no Judaism, no Christianity, no Islam, no Marxism. There will be no militaries. There will be no conspirators. They're all gone. And the conditions are ideal. Yoel is the summation of all prophetic revelation. After telling us what Yehudim would endure during the time of trouble, and then explaining how we would arrive at this juncture following the Shavua and Teruah, Qatsyr and Lakat. Yahweh is now affirming the renewal of his Bereth with Yisrael. This is the very day he addressed in the 31st chapter of the prophet Yirmiyahu, when he spoke of the reaffirmation of his covenant. The divorce pronouncement in Hosea is now over. And it's not Yahweh who is remarrying Yisrael. No, that would be in violation of the covenant. No, it's Dod, who has become the groom. It is the Adam Parah that will serve as the means to purify the adulterous woman. so that she's prepared for the betrothal. This is the very day that is addressed in the 31st chapter, yes, of Jeremiah. The divorce is finally over. The millennial of forced silence, when Yahweh agreed that he would not speak to his people or appear to in their presence, is finally at an end. This is exactly what was foretold also in Yeshaya and Zechariah. And we trust the Torah's pronouncement that Kippurim, the day of reconciliation, will lead to Sukkah, with that beginning a time of happily ever after. The key to restoration of Yisrael, the individuals who engage and endure with God, and to Yahweh returning and living in our midst, is the recognition and pronouncement of his name. He is Yahweh. He is God. There is no other. And the covenant is his family. He is our Father. In celebration of this, I once wrote, speaking for God, I am Yahweh, and I am God. So why is my name outlawed? Hashem is an ugly facade. Why remain so flawed with this nasty fraud? I offered you kinship, a loving relationship, a partnership, a special fellowship, and your retort was religious lip. My story is of grain, of olives and wine. Why do you decline? Even worse, wine. You could be mine. Before this deadline, read the sign. Be fine, and by design. Yahweh is my name. To Yisrael I came. You denied my acclaim. You fled my flame. You erased my name. I told you everything you needed to glow. Revelations to help you grow. My son sowed the seeds, don't you know? And yet you denied him with a crushing blow. Your Messiah returns. He's been here before. Your guilt he bore. He opened the door. Of this and more, I swore. It's foretold throughout his Mizmor. Dode, he is my son, my chosen one. Your salvation he won. It's already done. A Savior as bright as the sun. From my anointed, you should not run. He served as the Passover lamb, yet you don't seem to give a damn. He fulfilled the promise made to Abraham. He opened that door jamb. So Yahweh is my name, and to Yisrael I came. You denied my acclaim. You fled my flame. Worse, you erased my name. I have always loved you. I only wish you knew. Yet you haven't a clue. Such nonsense you spew. So the final harvest, it will be few. The truth was not hidden. It's religion that's forbidden. And now that you are so war-ridden, please look back at all that was written. Yahweh, that is my name, and it was to Yisrael I came, but you denied my acclaim. You fled my flame. You erased my name. When I was your God and Dode was your king, there was a different song to sing. To the Goyim, you did not cling. You were shielded from their sting. Isolated and hated, you are now battered. Your dreams are shattered. The nation is tattered. My words, they have not mattered. It's all here in the Mikra. There is no reason to have gone astray. There's always been a better way. Join me on Shabuah, I say. Yes, Yahweh is my name, and it was to Israel I came, yet you denied my acclaim. You fled my flame. You erased my name. With Dode as your Messiah, as was foretold in Isaiah, you were not a pariah. Have you read Jeremiah? Dode is his name. To Yisrael he came, yet you denied his acclaim. You have robbed him of his fame. Isn't that a shame? Who served as the lamb? Whose blood is on that door jamb? Do you need a diagram? Or do you even give a damn? Do you know the Son who was given? For what has he striven? How are you to be forgiven? What is your decision? Yes, Dode is his name, and to Israel he came. Yet you denied his acclaim. You robbed him of his fame. Have you no shame? This need not be the end of this story. You have been called to glory. My covenant, to it be a signatory. Of my Torah, do query. It's time. What is mine is repliven. Let me remove your leaven, all on the basis of 7. Then, and only then, can I bring you to heaven. Oh, Yahweh is my name, and it was to Israel that I came. Accept my acclaim. Embrace my fame. Reinstate my name. I thank you for listening.